Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. WeatherBrains episode 970. 970. Wow. This is for what is this? The 19th of August, 2024. Hey, we're getting close to the first day of meteorological fall here. I mean, a couple of weeks away. I mean, it's almost that time. We've got high school football starts this week. College football starts next week. We're going to be down here in the 50s early Wednesday morning. Of course, that means it'll be a triple-digit heat in September. We all know that. But hey, it is what it is. But yeah, we're enjoying this continental air from the north. We can thank our friend Jennifer Nairmore for that, sending it from the Arctic Circle and her home QTH there. So Bill's eating pizza, and Alan is being intellectual as always.
Now I'm
Intellectual.
being confused, trying to make sure I have the right microphone running here.
He's here
Sounds
early
perfect.
though, James. That's always the
Yep.
sign of a great
It did
guest.
it. There you go.
It's going
Well,
to be
good to
it's gonna
see
be a
you
good night.
guys.
I feel good about this. It's going to be good. It's going
Oh,
to be
yeah.
really good.
Without a doubt.
So we'll just Alan, so you know, we're streaming on YouTube now. We'll start. We hit the local television at 7. It's top of the hour, and then the recorders. Most people listen, but still, you got a lot of people that watch. So
Yeah.
but we're streaming live on YouTube now. So I have to tell Bill Murray to stop. Don't cuss or take your pants off or do anything
Have I ever
outrageous here.
cussed on WeatherBrains?
That's a good question. I think we should see that if any, how many of us have said an ugly word here. I think if any of us have said one, it would be entry level cuss words.
Right.
Not
Oh,
the
yeah.
heavy stuff. Now we've had guests. I mean, we've
Drop a
had Chuck
couple.
Doswell on the show. So
Yeah.
anytime you get Chuck Doswell on the show, you're going to have a couple of ones in there. I was tell the master control guys, all right, be ready with a button.
Yeah.
But no, most of our guests have been fairly well behaved. I still, every time I see Elise Smith in Houston, I think of that famous WeatherBrains episode in the auditorium in the basement of the National Weather Center in Norman, Oklahoma, where
You
Chuck
nearly
got
derailed her entire career.
we almost just broke her. I mean, it was horrible. And Chuck started it. He starts it,
Yeah.
and he yanks me into it. And so
Mhm.
we were both just berating this poor young college woman.
You weren't berating
and,
her. You were.
It was horrible. Well, it
You
wasn't
didn't
nice.
say
And-
anything
and-
ugly about her.
No, but it was not nice. But I'll never forget that literally two or 3 months after that, I looked out my door in this office, and she was standing there. And I thought she had come to just kill me. I
What a
thought
lawsuit.
she's come back to haunt me. And she was an intern here that summer, and I apologized profusely. And I think she's accepted my apology, and now she's in a top 10 market, doing very well in Houston, Texas. And
Yeah.
Well,
but
there you go.
maybe
that
maybe
event
that
probably
night.
shaped her career. James.
Yeah, that's right.
That's it. See, we got her thinking about it. Maybe.
You did.
And so it's cool to
And
see
she wanted
them,
to prove you wrong.
That's right. These two guys don't know what they're talking about. She probably put my face and Chuck's face on her steering wheel for the next 2 years. But yeah, that was.
We've had her on the show since then, though. She was very, very
Yes,
nice.
we have. Yes, we have, and she's totally accepted our apologies. So there we go. So I saw Alan at CCAPS. Bill, you ever been to CCAPS in Mobile, the University
No,
of
and I
South
want to
Alabama?
go so bad. I'm
You
gonna
have to
next
go.
year. Mm-hmm.
You must actually present. They won't announce it until mid-fall, late fall. But either way, yeah, you've got all sorts of stuff you can present.
I always love
But
coming.
anytime
Mobile.
anytime you got John Gordon on the docket, you know it's going to be good. I mean, just strap in. And I mean, John just he was working that front row. John doesn't stand up there at that little podium. He's going to get down there and work the crowd. And if he knows there's students in the crowd, he's really going to work the crowd.
He's like
And he
Gallagher.
was, yeah, exactly. He was at the top of his game at CCAPS this year. And what's
That was a
bad,
good
I
lineup.
kind of do the same. I kind of do the same thing. I'll get out of that thing, and I went to the same guy that John was talking to it never sit on the front row when John Gordon's talking or me, because inevitably you will be selected to answer some questions. And we don't do like we did poor Elise. I mean, we're just trying to gauge the audience. But that was a weird day because I had to come back, and Neil Jacobs came in, for the next day, and I'm oddly enough I missed Neil.
Right. Yeah.
The WeatherBrains 1-2 punch.
Yeah, but that was good. I think that was the first one, Alan, they did since COVID, right? In person.
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was the first one in a long time.
Because I want to say the last time I was there, it was Marshall Shepard, Rich Thompson, and Mike Gibson from Gibson Ridge. It was Rich, Marshall, me, and Gibson, and that was a fun one. We had a great time that year.
That was a good lineup too.
But they really put on a good show. That's a very good event. If you've never attended CCAPS, and it's typically sometime in February, March, April, somewhere in there.
Yeah,
earlier in the year. So who's going to NWA here?
I am going. Yep.
I'm not.
Okay.
I'm not going to be able to go.
Now,
I'll be opening a hotel.
I have good information on its location next year. Is this public information?
Probably not.
know.
I haven't heard anything beyond this.
I don't think I can say it, but I have good
Put it
information.
in the chat, James.
spell
That's
it.
useful information.
Yeah. We'll stick it in the chat. No, I don't want to get my legs broken by somebody within the NWA executive committee. But I do believe that that is the correct location.
Yeah, I could see that.
We'll see.
Really?
That's the hot rumor, and I have very good sources. But we will let them make the announcement and not me. So, but this year it's Dallas Fort Worth. Is it Dallas Fort Worth this year?
Whatever that little community right
Irving,
next to Dallas.
Arlington.
Irving.
Is it Arlington? Irving. Yeah,
Irving.
That's right.
The mid cities, as we call it.
Yeah, you know that
Channel
area
4,
well, don't you?
Channel 4 News, Dallas Fort Worth, with Steve Bosch, Clarice Tinsley, James Spann, and Paul Crane on sports.
With action weather.
Hear that voice just like it was yesterday, and this was 40 years ago.
I was so heartbroken when you left, James. Just broke my heart.
In literally 40 years ago, this date, what is this, August 19th, I was into my second week at Channel 4 in Dallas, had a newborn infant at home. He was born the day after they told me I was going to be transferred. And they were making major personnel changes, and I was a company man, and they told me, don't talk to anybody. You just go do the weather and let us handle the situation. And I'll never forget my first night on the air, and I was obviously a little nervous, and I was putting my mic on and getting ready, and some older guy came up and he slapped the snot out of me. I mean, he slapped me hard, not on my face, but on my hand and my arm. And he called me boy. And he said, you do that one more time, boy. And at first I thought he was joking, but I realized, no, this guy's not joking.
You should have slapped him back.
He would file a grievance on my backside so fast that you won't know what your name is, boy.
I'm gonna file a grievance on you too.
Yeah, I learned real quick about union shops there. So the engineers were IBEW, and the news department was AFTRA. There were two different unions, and they didn't get along well. The whole thing, the whole dynamic of that was a little odd. And I didn't join either one of them, so they all hated me. I mean, weather people are outliers anyway, and so I'll just be an outlier because I didn't know which one to join. I'm not a journalist. and I'm not really an engineer. But I would, if I join one, it would be that one, the engineering side of it. But I heard if you do that, the news people will hate you. So it was an interesting dynamic. But I'm very thankful for the experience. I met some amazing people in the weather enterprise that I will cherish the relationships I've had with them. Looping through Dallas, it was good. But anyway, good to be back. So it's hey, the top of the hour. Welcome to our television viewers. I'm rambling on about nothing. So we got our guest here. It looks like most of our show folks are here. So let's get the thing started. Let's do this. Track 1 and track 2, and here comes Neil. All right, here we go in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
You're listening to WeatherBrains. They're kind of a big deal.
Ooh, kind of a big deal, according to Bill Curtis. Hey, this is WeatherBrains, episode number 970. I mean, we are cruising. We are cruising towards show 1000. It'll be up in the spring. Hard to believe.
Think about it. I don't want to think about it, James. We got to hurry up and plan this thing.
Yeah. And listen, we say this all the time. You know, we're not the best weather podcast in the world. We're not. But by golly, we're the oldest. We were the first. This is year 18 for the show here. And hit 1,000 next year. But thanks. It's going to be a great show tonight. Feel good about this. It's going to be a lot of fun. Looks like most of our regulars are filling the room here. And let's see. Troy Kimmel is with us down in Austin. Troy, who does Texas open the season with?
Oh God, you would ask me that question. I could tell you the Aggie deal, but let's see what Texas.
Football brains. I know you're an Aggie, but you're in Austin.
Colorado State a week from Saturday. Aggies will play Notre Dame at home. We're also here at UT. Will be at home on that Saturday, and the Aggies will be at home against Notre Dame over in Kyle Field as well.
So, ooh, that'd be a good one.
Yeah, it just dawned on me today that I've got less than 2 weeks to get my equipment back down to Tuscaloosa, because they open up a week from this Saturday with a home game. So I have, goodness gracious, the time is just accelerating here, which is crazy. So, Jen, thank you on behalf of all of us down here in the low latitudes. Thank you for the refreshing air that you opened up. We appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Anytime. Jen, it was 104 here today.
Yeah, I was going to say 111 in Lawton this afternoon.
I was going to say 104 here today.
I'm so sorry.
I'm talking about the deep South, though, not the Southwest,
right.
The deep South over here.
I'm actually, James, I'm going to be up in Corinth and Tupelo next week, at the end of this week. And for the weekend, I've got something I'm going to be doing up there. So I'll be actually back in the cooler air for a little bit.
Ooh, okay. You'll have to bring break out your jackets and sweaters.
Exactly.
I have my sweatpants back on. Tomorrow night, 46 here.
Ooh.
So a little bit on the nippy side. I'll take it. And as we're going to talk a little football, Penn State starts at West Virginia a week from Saturday. So we're a noon game at West Virginia.
So welcome to Football Brains. We're glad you're here. This is a joyous football season for my little TV station here, because the SEC has moved from CBS to ESPN/ABC, which means we get Alabama and Auburn and those type teams on our channel, which is a very good revenue producer. And in the television business, revenue producing, James, aid a lot is a good thing. Don't you agree?
Absolutely. I've always heard if you don't generate content, you better generate revenue. And if you can do both, hooray.
Yeah, that's a win-win. How hot was it in Tulsa today?
It was only 92. Yesterday was 99 with heat index just south of Tulsa, and Okmulgee was 123 at one point yesterday.
Wow.
A little steamy.
Let's go over to Kim Floco McLean, who's in the Oklahoma City, Norman area. Probably a little more toasty out your way, huh, Kim?
Yesterday was one of our hottest days. I was actually pulling up the Mesonet to see how far we'd gotten. It looks like over 100, and it was unpleasant. I remember at one point yesterday, I think it was 103. So yeah, it's great. Today being 95. Yeah, it's a small break. We'll take it.
Wave.
It's miserable.
So
it's
better than a hailstorm, right, Kim?
You know,
So Rick, yeah, that's a very good point.
Yeah.
Hey, Rick Smith. So Twisters is on like home television now. So I saw your part. I told everybody in the room, I know that man. I know that man. It was outstanding. Great job.
Yeah, I nailed it. I mean, I think I've been practicing my whole life for that. So no, that's the ideal way to catch it because you can pause it and yeah. So yeah, it is
just too stinking cool. Gosh. Wow, that is outstanding. So what's happening out at the Weather Service in Norman? What's the latest?
Oh gosh,
rumor mill stuff. What's going on?
School started back today, and we've got a radar applications course. A bunch of brand new Weather Service meteorologists in the building, taking their final week-long radar training course, and we've got hazardous weather test bed and it's hot and it's going to be a little bit cooler the next couple of days. So it's just, there's just all kinds of things to be excited about.
So who does OU open up with? Who we got?
OU opens up with Temple on
Friday
night. First Friday night game.
That's right.
Ever,
That's right.
I think.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that.
Wow.
I think we can thank Kevin Claesel in large part for that and trying to get the game out of the 11 a.m. or 1:30 p.m. Saturday time slot and get it at least a little bit less sunny and hopefully cooler too. But yeah, looking forward to that.
All right, Friday night special. Well, let's go to our East Coast correspondent, Dr. Neil Jacobs. Dr. Jacobs, who does North Carolina State play this? Who do they open up with?
I think they start with Western Carolina.
Ooh, okay. So you are, have you been out surfing to tell us about your encounter with, come on, we're curious. Curious minds want to know here. Ernesto gave you what you wanted.
Yeah, it was good. A few good days of solid swell. I'm down in Charleston now. But yeah, it was, that was like the perfect track that you want. I mean, it could have been a little closer, a little bigger, but certainly, far enough away so you're not getting a lot of the wind, but you're still getting the swell.
Got to give Kim credit in the chat for her quote here, Dr. Jacobs, who despite his best efforts is still alive. So
I fell off the radar for a while. Texts from people, they're like, are you okay? We haven't heard from you, but I'm down in Charleston at my mom's house, and my cousins are here from Tok, Alaska.
Oh, wow.
I was trying to get them on the podcast, but I think they're so jet lagged that they went to bed. But I got a funny story. I got a funny story about their granddad. He was a cooperative observer for 50 years.
Yeah. And
after he passed away, got a 50-year cooperative observer award signed by Louis Uccellini. And my aunt calls me and she's like, "Do you know this Louis guy?"
No.
Certificate. This was when I worked at NOAA. So
wow.
Yeah, I've heard of him.
You've heard the name. You've heard that name somewhere. Wow. But we're just, everybody in the chat room is just, we're happy you're alive. Thank you for surviving the week.
I did my
the weather world the weather world cannot survive without you and your modeling knowledge. But let's go to Bill Murray, and Bill's going to bring in our guest for the week. I'm excited. It's going to be a fun show this week.
Yeah, James, tonight's Guess WeatherBrain really needs no introduction, but I'll do one anyway. He's a highly respected figure in the world of meteorology, known for his extensive experience and expertise in forecasting and broadcasting and educating the public about weather. He has multiple degrees in meteorology, including a master's from Cornell and a bachelor's from Florida State. Over the years, he's been a trusted voice in weather reporting, particularly along the Gulf Coast, where he served as the chief meteorologist at a couple stations in Mobile for a very, very long time. With more than 3 decades in the field, he's covered a wide range of weather events, from hurricanes to severe weather, earned numerous awards for his work, multiple regional Emmys, active member of the American Meteorological Society. He's been president of the AMS Board of Broadcast Meteorology, been president of the National Weather Association, He's known for his clear and engaging style. He's passionate about making complex weather topics simple. Alan Seals, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much. It was funny. I had to stop and think when I was last with you guys, and it was October of last year when I was still working back in the old days.
Which leads to our first question. How is life after television?
It is awesome. It truly is. It's
we hear that a lot, James. I think that's a theme.
Yeah. Boy, I want to hear more about this.
Okay. Well, it's everything that I had hoped and planned for. And I tell people I'm not retired. I'm retired from TV, but I'm still an active meteorologist. So I'm not forecasting anymore, but I am doing more and more weather consulting, working on a case right now about an ice storm, which is always fascinating, but really cool, the whole variety of flood, mold, hurricane damage, you name it. So that's one thing that's keeping me busy. I still do teach that one course at the University of South Alabama, Intro to TV Weather Broadcasting, every spring. I'm writing a weather column every other week for the local newspaper. Back when we last talked, I was finishing up, or I had just finished my weather books, 3 books that I had put together. So those are doing pretty good. And now I'm doing more and more weather photography, which I have an exhibit in one of the galleries in downtown Mobile. And really, I'm not bored. I'm busier than I was before. It's just I'm busy when I feel like being busy. Oh, and I get to travel. That's the other part.
Well,
So tell us what's a normal day like in your life? You in this, not retirement, but you've changed your duties and responsibilities. Because I know what the TV routine is like. What's a day like now for you?
Right. So I still pretty much keep my TV hours, which is going to bed at 1 a.m., 2 a.m., getting up 9 a.m. or 10 a.m. But now it's there's no pressure to jump on the computer and look at data. Eventually, I'll look. If it's a perfectly sunny day, I may not look at any data. I may just live my life as a normal person, sensing the atmosphere, because there'll be a thunderstorm somewhere in Mobile every summer afternoon. My wife and I, we were in Chicago 2 weeks ago, and it was such a joy for me to fly home and say, oh, there's a hurricane in the Gulf. Now, I don't miss any of that. As James, and both James will tell you, it's that stress of having to follow every little update on every little system. Same for Rick, of course, with severe weather. It was fun. It was challenging, but I really like that everything is on my time. So typical day, I usually have 2 tasks on my calendar. One may be to return a phone call to an attorney. The other one may be, for example, after I'm finished here, I have to write a report for the case that I'm working on. And then, of course, so here's what I did today, which is really cool. My internet was messing up the last few days, last few weeks, intermittent, and tried to troubleshoot it. And I finally realized that my cable splitter box is 25 years old, the one that's outside. So I said, that's got to be it. So I ran out, bought a new splitter, plugged it in, and boom, internet's working like great. So that's my typical day. It's finding little things to do in the midst of doing projects here and there. Have a speaking engagement coming up. I was actually invited to 2 colleges to speak in the next 2 months regarding what Bill was interested in, my piece on this history of African-American meteorologists. So every day's a little different. I usually have a small task and a big task and lots of no task.
Well, you're giving us all hope, Alan. That's
yeah.
really good. I don't know that I've ever gotten to sit down and talk to you about what your early inspiration came from. Talk about what sparked your interest in meteorology and how you decided to pursue it as a career.
Yeah. It just sort of organically happened. I know most of us, we have a story of one big event that really just shocked us. To me, it was just one little event after another where every little one made me say, how could that happen? How could that possibly be? So growing up outside of New York City, now here's the interesting part. My dad worked at CBS News behind the scenes. He was a manager. And I went down to CBS when I was a kid. I met Walter Cronkite, Andy Rooney. I met all these guys, didn't know who they were. And I never really watched TV news, even though my parents watched it always. But for me, the weather part, one of my earliest memories was as a kid, probably 7 years old. Out in the backyard, we had a slight slope, so I had my flexible flyer sled. I was out in the snow in the middle of the winter. It was snowing lightly. I saw a flash and heard that muffled rumble, and it was thunder snow. And it shocked, well, it didn't electrocute me, but it psychologically shocked me as to how could this possibly happen? You could have lightning in the middle of the winter. So that kind of stayed with me. In third grade, the teacher took us outside, Miss Costello. We had an assignment where we were laying in the grass, looking up in the sky and looking at the clouds and trying to imagine what shapes they look like. And while we were doing that, it hit me. It's like, wait a minute, those clouds are made of water. How is it possible water can float in the sky? And to this day, it's still, to me, it's an incredible law of physics. And then you get down to the molecular level and it kind of makes a little more sense. But even when you look at why clouds float, water vapor lighter than dry air and a slight updraft, it still is not intuitive. For example, here's my glass of water. If I turn it, which I won't, it's going to the ground. But it's amazing that, to me, stuff like that. Later in elementary school, I experienced a hailstorm. I was in charge before my mom went to work of looking out the window, reading our window thermometer, letting her know what the temperature was. And I realized there are certain times of the year where the sun hits the thermometer directly and the temperature shoots up. So all of that stuck with me. And it really wasn't until 11th grade that I realized that I could have a good career having fun as a scientist, using my brain, using my skill of performing and talking. And I targeted it from that point, and it has gone the way I wanted it to go.
That is awesome. So where was your undergraduate, Alan?
So undergrad was Cornell.
Was Cornell. So not just your master's. You had your undergraduate and master's from there.
Yeah. So well,
That's
no, I'm
pretty
sorry.
Cool.
Cornell undergrad, FSU grad school.
Got it.
Yeah. Which Cornell was great, a party school. I had too much fun. That's why I had to go to grad school. Literally, my grades went like that. Even though I learned a lot about myself and a lot about life and people. But I knew that I needed to really bulk up the science because I let it slide. I was having too much fun.
Wait, Florida State is not as big of a party school as Cornell?
Well, as a grad student, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so that's the big difference.
That is too funny. So yeah, I guess you experienced a lot of snow then in your career. So it was quite a change and a shock to the system to spend a lot of your career in the Deep South.
It was amazing when I first got to FSU I lived off campus, 2 miles off campus. I didn't have a car. I had a bike. And every day going back home, 3 o'clock in the afternoon, here comes the sea breeze and a shower and thunderstorms. That was amazing to me. Also, that was my first experience with a hurricane in 1985, close to Thanksgiving. That was
later than that.
The name escapes me. It was a Cat 1. But as I was sitting in my apartment with no power, hearing the wind blowing and the trees swaying, it hit me that if you're in the wrong place at the wrong time, there's nothing you can do. So that was a real message I got out of that storm. That if you're not prepared in advance, your options are limited.
So what were some of the most memorable weather events that you covered during your career, Alan?
So coming up on the 20th anniversary of Ivan, that was the big one. It was, it was everything. It was everything, both meteorologically and in terms of communication. We went on air live continuously, I think 3 days before the storm hit. And then we stayed on, this was when I was at WKRG in Mobile. And then we stayed on another 5 days after it hit. Well, we had commercial breaks after that, but still 5 days. But just, everything I ever learned, every science principle. Fortunately, I had gone to so many conferences. Here's my conference shirt. I still go, but so many conferences where I learned the ins and the outs of tropical meteorology, that it wasn't hard. It was just a matter of pacing yourself. And the Ivan, much like Katrina, you're working the storm. You know what's happening, but you don't really know what's happening until you see those first images and you hear the on the ground reports of how people's lives are impacted. It's not really real. It's just data when you're sitting in that office. But yeah, those were the lessons. Ivan and Katrina were the big storms for me. Fortunately, the climatology of Mobile doesn't produce a lot of big bad tornadoes, produces the little ones. So very few tornado outbreaks that were that compared to Ivan and Katrina. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So go back to you were in high school in the 70s and deciding what to do. Who were some of your mentors and folks that you looked up to back in those days? And how has that translated into your emphasis on mentorship today? Because I know that's important to you.
Right. So as I mentioned, even though I had a simmering passion for weather, for people who can't conceptualize this, no internet, no cell phones, no Facebook, no TikTok. It was library, reference desk. That was, and then cable. The Weather Channel had just started in the 70s. And on PBS, there was AM weather. But I didn't have cable, and I didn't watch AM weather. So I never really watched weather. So I didn't know of any individuals who were meteorologists. I did meet, because my dad worked at CBS News in New York, he set up a meeting for me with Irv Jakovsky, Mr. G, who's still on TV in New York. He was a high school teacher who became weekend meteorologist and then chief meteorologist, and he's going strong. But when I went for that visit, I saw clearly that the spectrum of things that he did as a TV weather person, that was for me. But there was really no one person or mentor. Now, of course, I had my Boy Scout troop leader. I had my baseball coach. I had my Sunday school teacher, my parents, my brothers. So there were a lot of people, and my counselors, a lot of people who guided me just as a young person, but no one who really could guide me with regard to the meteorology aspect.
Yeah, that's funny because I lived and died for AM weather and aviation weather, and I called the poor number, the little recording at the Weather Service, probably 18 times a day. And I wore that Boy Scout book with the weather merit badge out. I mean, that thing just, it was like getting information anywhere you could. And this weekend was the anniversary, of course, of Hurricane Camille, which is my first remembered weather event, in 1969. And, on the 17th, of course, marked the landfall. And the Weather Service in Mobile put out a really fascinating, that someone in the AMS had done several years ago, a recreation of the Mobile radar, or maybe it was the Boothville radar. Troy can probably correct me on that.
I don't know. It may have been the Boothville, but I don't know if that Boothville radar made it through that far.
Yeah, probably didn't.
Yeah.
What could have been the Jackson radar, I guess.
Right.
Troy,
and actually, all that, I think what we saw, Bill, was actually, and Alan can answer this, I'm pretty sure that came as a result of a tweet from NWS there in Mobile. They did something over the weekend, and it brought up to me the things that I remember. I still remember that Sunday night. That it moved to shore. That was in 1969. That was, by the way, as North Mississippi was seeing desegregation. That's the one thing I remember that year. We were going through desegregation. It was the first time that we in Corinth ended up going to Eastham High School, which became South Corinth High School. That was the first year. But I remember all that night listening to WWL out of New Orleans, Alan, and listening to their broadcast. I still remember that night.
I bet James Fan has a story about that. I remember JB talking about listening. I think he was out in Colorado, James, or somewhere, and he could hear WWL, that clear channel radio.
I don't think they know how many people they actually touch with that overnight broadcast. And most people today can't even grasp this idea of AM clear channel radio at night. At night, you could hear 50,000 watt stations over much of the contiguous United States. And most stations had to sign off at sunset to allow these stations to broadcast like that. And when the sun would come up, you couldn't hear them anymore. And it was heartbreaking. I stayed up all night listening to Nash Roberts on WWL, King Edward Cigar Time, 4 a.m. And I was 13 years old, and it was life-changing for me. The whole thing was just like this drama that was constantly unfolding, and then you couldn't pick up the station anymore, and you didn't get any news. You didn't know. So a lot of people were listening to that blowtorch 50,000 watt clear channel radio station that night.
Yeah, I could not wait for sunset. So you could pick up WWL whenever there was anything affecting the northern Gulf Coast. Well, what Troy brings up there is a great segue, Alan, because you've done a fabulous survey, and it's not comprehensive, but it's pretty darn close, and it's certainly eye-opening because it chronicles the highlights that of a lot of folks who haven't gotten any attention at all, and some who have, but it puts it all in context. What was your inspiration for doing this presentation that I have back here, and that'll be my pick of the week for this week from YouTube?
Yeah. So the presentation is not YouTube. It started off as a PowerPoint presentation on the history of African Americans in meteorology. And it's simply because one of my colleagues at the University of South Alabama, who's in the library, who encouraged me to do weather photography exhibiting and then helped me with my book, she said, well, you'd be really good at why don't you put together a presentation for Juneteenth Day for the university? And I always talk, so I said, sure, I'll do it. And then I spent weeks trying to figure out what I was going to talk about. I was thinking, oh, okay, Juneteenth, it's close to the start of hurricane season. I could always fall back and talk about hurricanes. And then as we got later in the spring, little bit of politics here. Hopefully it won't cause any friction. But the Alabama Senate Bill 129, which is the bill regarding divisive concepts and the state not supporting diversity, equity, inclusion. And without debating that, it hit me that there are some laws that are passed based on ignorance or lack of knowledge. Well, actually, a lot of them. So I figured, well, let me educate people. Let me show where we've been and how we got to be where we are and how I got to be where I am, which is, you talked, Bill, earlier about role models. I never met a meteorologist until I was in college. Of course, I met a TV weatherman when I was in high school. I never met a Black meteorologist until I was going into my senior year. Fred Barnhill was the first Black meteorologist I met at the Weather Channel. And then Jesse Moore worked there behind the scenes. I had never met a Black PhD until I was in my second year of grad school. And so what's interesting about it for me, and people who know me, I'm a human being. That we all are human beings. So I don't give much thought to how I got to where I am, other than this is what I wanted to do. I'm doing it. People like the way I'm doing it, and that's wonderful. But there are so many marginalized people who have never seen someone like them. So they don't realize they can do things that they've never seen someone like them do. I was raised to know that there's no obstacle. Well, there are obstacles, but you can get around them or under them or around them. So that's how I came up with doing this history of African Americans meteorologists, which I learned so much. We all learn a little bit about history, and we all know that history depends on who's telling the story. But there was so much that I learned. Half of it was just from doing online research, Library of Congress, newspapers, the National Archives online, and word of mouth, because the number of Black meteorologists, percentages, and I'd say Black, African American, I interchange, just like you can interchange Negro and colored, but the percentage is still very tiny. Still, we are only about 2, maybe 3% across the board for the United States. So that's what drove me to do the presentation, and it started growing and growing and growing. It's still growing. I just found out the first two Black male and female hurricane hunters with the 53rd Weather Reconnaissance Squadron.
Yeah, that'll have to be added to the presentation, Alan. I noticed in the comments too, you'd encourage people to give you any other information that they knew, because you were upfront in the presentation. You said, I don't know everything,
Right?
And please put it in the comments for me if there's something that I've missed. And there were a couple of good comments in there.
Yep, I have found that, and we know this, if you post something online that's wrong, people are happy to correct you, even if they think it's wrong and it's not. But sadly, I didn't get a lot of additions. I still want more because there's so much out there. It's just a lot of it was not documented. Most people, like myself, we don't dwell on our achievements. We're always looking forward, trying to do more rather than looking backward. So I would love for some students to take it and really do a thesis on it and do in-person interviews with some of the older meteorologists and just really fill it out.
I'm going to put James A. on the spot because he's asking a very important question in the chat, and I want Kim to follow up with her opinion on it and get yours, Alan.
Yeah, and my question would be, is it this way in all STEM fields, at least in this country? Because even I remember girls, even in the middle school, kind of discouraged from taking advanced math and things like that. So, and I mean, all of the teachers were white men that taught math and science. And I think, and here I am, the white guy, saying it's important for people to see people that look like them doing the things they want to do. And I don't think that has, I hope it's changing now.
Kim, you want to jump in?
I mean, my halfway informed opinion on this, I do believe it to be pervasive across STEM fields. I'm not sure offhand how we compare against others. I don't know if our underrepresentation ratio is worse than
I think
say
it is.
Yeah. I think it is, and I think that you see a better representation in some kinds of engineering. I think that there, and this is me just trying to recall. Might have been a BAMS paper that I read, looking at some of the statistics and underlying thoughts about why they were the way they were. But one of the things that's interesting about our field is that people don't necessarily see the career path as easily. And so as an investment in education, you think of, okay, you're going to go to school to be an engineer, to be a doctor. Like if there are STEM fields where you're going to have people of color who are able to make that investment, it's in those more traditional, things that are solid job opportunities. Whereas something like meteorology could easily be seen as something that you can only do if you're extremely privileged, and would only be something you could pursue if your family was there to support you. I think that's when I, looking on the field, that's very much what describes a lot of us. So I wouldn't be surprised, Alan, if you're right. I wouldn't be surprised if it's worse in meteorology than other STEM fields.
Yeah, I haven't looked at a lot of the other fields, but most of the statistics I see, meteorology is worse. And I think what's important when you go back to Alabama Senate Bill 129 is I'm not blaming anybody. It's the history of where our country was to where it is now. Its legacy. It has been entitlement. It has been putting up roadblocks for some people. It's changing now. It's changing rapidly for the better. And I'll do a quick plug here. So there's my book right there, A Career in TV Meteorology. This is one of the books I wrote in the fall, and I wrote it partly for that reason, to let young people know that you can do this. It's a fun, cool, interesting career, regardless of your gender, your ethnicity, your ability. weather impacts all human beings equally, or at least to start, and then your economic situation controls the actual outcome. But yeah, even just yesterday, I had a young black man who's he's in school for, I think, engineering, and he's considering changing his major to meteorology. So I'm going to talk to him, and that goes back to what you had mentioned, Bill, about mentorship. Um, I I mentor anybody, male, female, black, white, Asian, you name it, anyone interested in weather. If we have a natural connection, I'm more than happy to help and guide you and yeah, let you know the ins and the outs, which of course is why I love teaching. It's the same thing of you grow the next generation and hopefully they can grow the generations after that.
Well, Alan, I had a job in college in a hotel, and it's kind of how I got started in the hotel business. But there was an older lady that worked on the front desk, and she loved the fact that I loved weather, and was constantly checking the weather and listening to the weather radio. Made the hotel get a weather radio, and she called me a weather prophet.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't really, I mean, I realized that the term was unique and probably old fashioned, but till I saw your presentation, I didn't see that it may be an even more significant term than that. So talk about that term. And was it a primarily African American reference, or was
So
it, did it involve all weather people?
actually all weather people. And so I'll take it back for people who haven't seen the actual presentation. It's prophet as in prophesize, as in
Exactly.
foretell the future. I had someone make a comment and they spelled it Profit.
It's certainly not a profitable business.
But I did not know until I started searching that the term weather prophet was really common in the mid to late 1800s into the early 1900s. And that was basically so and so up the hill who watched the sky frequently and made predictions or opinions, or oh, my elbow's feeling something, I think this is going to be a cold winter, and that was that sort of folksy or folktale or folklore type forecasting. And what I found is that I did a generic search for the term weather prophet in the Library of Congress, and it returned thousands of references to that in newspapers from the 1800s into the 1900s. The majority of them were not African American, were not colored or Negro, but there was a substantial number of colored weather prophets. So to me, what was amazing coming out of the Civil War Emancipation Proclamation is that it's possible that the colored weather prophets were deemed to be better maybe than non-colored weather prophets, maybe because of their connection to the land as former enslaved folks or sharecroppers, or maybe something even going back to Africa with their innate knowledge. Now, I don't know. That would be another great research paper. But what struck me as I was going back is that my great-grandmother, who was born in 1892, her father, she never called him a weather prophet, but she did say people would go to him to find out what the weather would be. And my dad would always laugh about that he'd say, oh, well, maybe something trickled down for the generations. So that's what the weather prophet thing is, that colored people were given respect because of their ability to predict the weather.
Well, and you mentioned earlier that the first meteorologist you met who was African American was Fred Barnhill, and I got to work with him at Channel 42 in Birmingham from 1991 to 1996, and well, but probably a short time less than that because he left a little bit before that. But in those 3 or 4 years, I got to work with and learn from him. And that was an amazing time. But take us back to a man whose name I'd heard, but I didn't associate with the fact that he was a first in so many ways, and that was William Hallett Green.
Yeah.
Talk about him for a minute, because he was a pioneer.
Oh, yes, he was. And this was one that I didn't know about until I started the research either. William Hallett Green, he graduated City University of New York. I have to glance at this. Mid 1800s. I'm sorry, 1880s. He was colored. He was very young. He was the first colored graduate of the university, I believe. And he was hired as a signal officer. So if you take the National Weather Service, before it was the Weather Service, it was the National Weather Bureau. Before it was the Weather Bureau, it was the Army Signal Corps. Army Signal Corps. And so back in the 1880s, there was no weather service. Now, there were no forecasts, but there were people taking weather observations around the country, slowly building a network. So this young man, he graduated with honors, top of his class. He was assigned to be an assistant weather observer in Pensacola, Florida, in 1884. And the chief officer in the office, Sergeant McGuaran, sent a note to his superiors, I'll paraphrase it, saying, basically, if you hire this colored person, I will leave. I will quit. I will not work with him. It is inappropriate for the Signal Corps to hire a colored person where we will become the laughing stock of the city and no one will accept him within their hotel. Literally, physical establishment. He couldn't find housing. The case, this was in the mid 1884. By the fall, it was in the newspapers around the country. And what's also fascinating when you look at history, especially for me as a Yankee living in the South, is there was the Southern version of the story and the Northern version of the story. And the Southern version kind of sided with the sergeant. The sergeant sent a letter to his superior saying, no, I will not accept him. I will quit. His superiors ended up going up the chain to the Secretary of War, who was Abraham Lincoln's son. So Secretary Lincoln. Secretary Lincoln said, yes, this young man, Mr. Green, will be assistant weather observer in Pensacola. The sergeant, basically, it was insubordination, but he had enough political connections that they didn't kick him out. They did demote him to private, and he ended up leaving the office. So William Hallett Green became I believe he became the office chief in Pensacola. And this again was 1884. So
a very impressive young man for sure.
Yeah. And then that, of course, opened up the door. As I was searching through the papers, I found a reference in 1901 to a Negro weatherman in Mobile. I couldn't find any other information on it other than that one sentence. I'm still looking. And then in 1909, there was another Negro or colored weatherman from Snow Hill, Alabama, which is south of Selma. He was working in Mobile, but he also had worked in Pensacola. Pensacola kicked him out. He ended up in Mobile. And then I think Mobile ended up kicking him out too, which it looks like it was all social pressure based on race.
Yeah, that was the way it was. It's terrible, and we can't imagine it now, but it's the way it was. We all learned in our fourth grade Alabama history books about Dr. George Washington Carver and the amazing things he did, but they never told us that he had an interest in weather. That would have been fascinating. Alan, tell us about that.
Yeah. So even there, as I was doing the research, I didn't realize that, well, he was at Tuskegee University, and most people know him for his work with peanuts and potatoes. But when you stop and think about it, it actually makes sense that if you are heavy into agriculture, you have to be heavy into weather. So not only was he into weather, he was what we would now call a cooperative weather observer for the Signal Corps or Weather Bureau. I think that was when it crossed over to Weather Bureau. But yeah, I'm just checking my notes here. That would have been about 1899, U.S. Weather Bureau. Yeah. So he did the daily log for years.
That is very cool, and I would have loved to have known that, because that would have been fascinating. And talk about, let's see who else I want to make sure we talk about, and you can mention anybody. The Tuskegee Weather Detachment.
Yes, so
that's a great segue to talk about that.
Most of us by now know of Tuskegee Airmen, the Red Tails, the highly decorated, highly effective Black pilots who became very trusted and respected. But even there, again, okay, airplanes, weather. There has to be a connection. And I didn't really think about it until I did more research and found that there were, and I don't have the full story of the program, and how it started, but Tuskegee was also a training ground for meteorologists. One of them was a young man by the name of Archie Moore. Make sure I get the name right here. Where'd it go? I'm sorry, Archie Williams. Archie Williams, you may know as a gold medalist in the 1936 Olympics, a Black man. He became a meteorologist at Tuskegee. And then there was Wallace Patillo Reed, who also became one of the first Black meteorologists within the Air Force, ended up going into the Air Force and also training. So many African Americans, whether it was Air Force or early PhDs, those are the ones that had roots in Tuskegee.
And Alan, talk about the importance of Jackson State,
Yeah.
getting a meteorology program, and then about Howard, getting one, because those two are milestones in that education process, which is so important to getting that, diversity in our field.
Yep.
To have those great universities turning out meteorologists.
Right. So Jackson State University, Jackson, Mississippi, it's a HBCU, historically Black college and university. In the mid 1970s, they had the foresight to actually start a meteorology program, which has cranked out huge numbers of African-American meteorologists. It's an undergraduate program, and they're coming up on their 50th anniversary next year. So that's going to be pretty cool. Their estimate is that 1 out of 3 African-American meteorologists is a Jackson State graduate. So one university has produced easily 1/3 of all undergraduate degrees for meteorologists, which is huge. For me, going into college in 1981, I didn't know that because, again, no internet, no cell phone, you didn't have the social networking. I don't know that it would have changed my path to Cornell, since Cornell was an in-state school for me, but still it would have been nice to know these things. And I think that's the important part of history is I learned so many things that would have given me a lift, just psychologically, to say, oh, these people have done this. There are other people like me out there. I can do more. I can be better. I can stop partying too much in college and get better grades. And then Howard University, they started a graduate program in 1996. Howard University in Washington, D.C., also a historically Black college and university. And their estimate is for the number of African Americans holding a PhD in meteorology, atmospheric science, that 40 to 50% graduated from Howard. So we're talking half or almost half of all Black PhDs. I can tell you, looking back in my career, when I was in college, even though I didn't know it, there were probably literally, I think there were 5 Black men who had earned a meteorology degree, PhD at that point, and the first Black woman earned in 1986. But from the late 80s to this point, Howard has really pushed that curve up with so many more students coming in, seeing role models, knowing that it's achievable, knowing that you don't have to fit that mold, the stereotype of what a scientist looks like or sounds like or talks like. So they've been doing great stuff, and a whole lot of talent is coming out of both Jackson State and Howard.
I had the opportunity to tour the meteorology department at Jackson State just a couple of weeks ago, because they had a community modeling workshop there. And it was awesome. It was a big shout out to my friend Jimmy Sims, who got that set up for us to do it there, and also to Bill Parker in the forecast office. So while we were there, we had a lot of students that were coming to the workshop. So they hosted a tour over to the forecast office. And I got to hear Bill tell me.
Oops, did Dr. Jacobs freeze there?
He's frozen.
Whoops. Whoops.
You may have
He
to
needs
run
to
a
go
splitter
change
box over to him, Alan.
that cable splitter box out.
Yeah, that's right.
Really?
You're back, Neil. We lost the last half of your
Yeah, we
sound.
lost
Yeah,
the tail end there,
I know.
Neil. Go again.
My mom's playing Minecraft. I'm sure that's what.
There's your show title.
Show title. Show title.
Yeah, I don't know where I dropped off, but I got to hear the entire history of the meteorology department from Bill Parker, and it was an amazing story.
Yeah. Yep. And to touch on one other thing that Bill said earlier, Bill Murray, and the thing with role models is I didn't have an African-American role model for what I do. For me, it didn't matter. And I think for most people, it doesn't matter, but it's important that for anybody to know that we are all role models for all people when they see the passion in what we do. And I think that's what really sells it, as it should, for any career, any young person looking at something, that it's about what the subject is, not what you are. And that's that we all can do it and have a ball with it.
And Alan, James Adelot has dug up some great statistics related to STEM. And I know you've got the same statistics on the meteorology side. So why don't y'all compare notes here for a minute about that? Because we were all interested in, whether the two follow the same sort of curve or not. So James A., take it away.
Yeah, and I found this 2021 data from the National Science Foundation report, which will be my pick of the week. And it's representation in STEM fields. It doesn't have a breakdown, at least what I've seen so far. Hispanic, Latino, 15%, Asian, 10%, African American, 9%, and Native American and Alaska Natives, less than 1%. And I'll get into the report when I have time tonight and see if that breaks it down by particular fields.
So how does that compare to some of the research that you did in reference to your presentation, Alan?
Okay, I am just trying to do a quick save here. I'm going to add this here, and then I'm going to tell you, boy, technology is great, isn't it?
I'm so happy to have it.
Okay, I'll tell you first.
I certainly will not complain ever about technology.
All right. So based on the AMS, American Meteorological Society, in 2020, their last survey for membership, and we assume the membership is close to what the whole field of meteorology is, but that may not be a great assumption. African Americans, 2%, Latino, Hispanic, 3%, Asian Americans, 5%, white or European, 89%. So everything else is less than 1%. So definitely for meteorology, much smaller numbers than the overall STEM fields.
I wonder what other STEM fields would be like that. I mean, if we're thinking physical sciences like this, would it be physics or astronomy like this?
I've heard similar for physics, yeah.
And Kim, you pointed something out important there, so jump in and say that.
Sorry, I'm putting all of my comments in the chat. Yeah, yes. I would assume it would be any field where the career path either relies on you having a PhD or is a little ambiguous. Like people don't, generally know all the different things you can do in that field, or you need to know about it through networking. Meteorology, I think, is one of those fields. And so that's another reason it's important to know the people who look like you have these jobs, because you can have that in your social network, that knowledge about how to get those jobs. So I would assume things like astrophysics, like things that are going to be a little bit niche or that are going to clearly require a PhD. I would assume those would be the things that are going to be similar to us. because that is vastly underrepresented compared to the share of the U.S. population that
Mhm.
that is Black.
And Alan, Dr. Charles Anderson, you mentioned in your presentation he was the first African American to earn a PhD in atmospheric science,
Yeah,
and he did it at MIT,
right.
which that's a pretty good place to do it. Talk about him. He had to be an amazing leader and an amazing pioneer to do that in the early 1960s.
Right. He has an AMS award named after him, which is one of the high AMS awards. I'm just trying to pull up his data here so I don't get the dates wrong. Another person who I did not know about until after I graduated college. I had learned about Warren Washington, who was the second African American to get a PhD, but I had learned
And the
about,
first AMS president, right?
yeah, that's correct. First African American AMS president. But he was there we go, Charles Anderson. So he went through Tuskegee, through the Tuskegee Weather Detachment. He did become an Army Air Force weather officer, and he became director of the Office of Federal Coordination in Meteorology, which I'm not sure what that is, but it's one of those acronym offices way up there. And then he was a professor for most of his career, the balance of it, at UW-Madison, becoming an associate dean. And he ended his career at a different university, although I forgot which one that is. But that was in 1960. So he would be the first documented African American to earn the PhD. As I did this, a couple of things stood out to me, which I've always thought through my life. You hear throughout history, you heard the terms colored, Negro, Black, African American to describe people of African descent, brown skin. But what's really funny and interesting, and it's all part of our U.S. culture, is there are some people, let's see, there's another gentleman, I don't want to detour too far out of this. One of the early Black meteorologists was described as a mulatto. Mulatto is a term which meant, initially it meant one of your parents was of European descent, white, the other one was African descent, Black. So you were half and half. And then variations, if you break it down by fractions, another artificial way to put people in boxes, but that's the way it was. But throughout my personal knowledge of Black folks and my parents and their grandparents and their cousins, there was a time for a long time where an African American person with lighter skin had the ability to visibly not be assumed to be African American. In other words, they could pass for being white. And that was the phrase, that a person could pass. So we don't know in history how many people who are African American who did not embrace that or announce that actually might have a meteorology degree or a PhD. And on the same hand, even among African Americans, as I think back to growing up in New York, which was a melting pot of the world, half my Black friends were from the Caribbean. A few were from Africa, first generation, but most were like me, somewhere of a descendant of an enslaved person at some point. So the point is, there's so many lines between what you call yourself, what you are, what people call you, what you choose to be. So that's part of why the research it can be really tricky. And the hard part is you don't want to offend somebody by assuming they are something that they say, no, I'm not that, even if they don't know they are that.
Alan, of course, I grew up in Birmingham watching, Pat Gray and Rosemary Lucas on Channel 6 and Channel 13. They were called Weather Girls then. Of course, they were white. But do you think Diane White Clato was the first African American, maybe not meteorologist, but
Right.
weathercaster that was African American?
From what I can find online, she's the first acknowledged Black woman to do weather on TV full time. And this was in St. Louis at what is now KSDK. Back then it was KSD 1962. I believe she started off as a model. No surprise there. That was typical in the 60s and 70s. And she then, of course, ended up doing weather. She preceded another Black woman who's a little more known who did weather, except that woman, June Bacon Bursey, actually was a meteorologist. She had a meteorology degree. She was the first woman to earn the AMS seal of approval, and she was the first Black person to earn the AMS seal of approval. She started in TV in the early 70s. She ended up, I can't remember where the transition was, but ended up working for NOAA for a while, did huge mentorship. I met her daughter at the AMS broadcast conference last June, which was really cool. And then there's, let's see.
Yeah, and she actually has an award named for her.
Yeah,
on the
June
AMS,
Bacon Bursey Award for broadcast meteorology.
And really we're kind of burying the lead, because that's what really caught my attention at the beginning, because we wanted to talk about her for a long time, and no better expert than you, given this fabulous presentation that you put together here, for sure.
Thank you.
Just love this. I've enjoyed watching it a couple of times, and enjoyed putting questions together tonight. What sort of impact do you hope that your presentation will leave for people who may watch it? And I hope a lot more people will watch it in the future as it gets a lot more acclamation.
I want people to know that this meteorology is a profession that's open to anybody. Anybody who has the passion can achieve. I also want, I don't see, young people right now are really good about seeing people more as people than in the boxes that our generation used to put people in just by tradition. So I would hope that a lot of the senior meteorologists throughout academia, military, can stop and realize that anybody can achieve. Don't assume that if a person looks a certain way or talks a certain way that they are not capable of doing what you did just because it's different. So I definitely wanted to just show the world that everyone can achieve. Black folks have achieved. We're still trying to. Give us the opportunity and we will.
That is absolutely true, and it's so amazing to see people finally being in positions so young people can see someone who looks like them, as we've mentioned several times tonight. That's really cool, and everyone's having a ball in the chat talking about they all started in modeling. And James Spann, I know that's something that you and I did not start as child models.
No, that didn't quite happen for the two of us. No, I started as a social zero.
I saw some reference to chain smoking in there earlier, and I was like, "Oh boy, yeah."
That was Kim. Yeah.
My parents chain smoked. I can remember my mother sitting over me in the third grade as I typed my report on the dangers of smoking. I think her ashes were falling in my Smith Corona. So, yeah, I learned real quickly not to smoke. So, Alan, of course, James always asks the hard questions, and a couple of the other panelists may have some other ones, but I've really enjoyed preparing for and getting to be a part of this show tonight. I missed a couple of your last shows, and I really hated that because I always enjoy getting to visit with you. And so I'll turn it over to James and any of the other panelists real quick. We got to make sure we get out to see the supermoon tonight. Sometime I think it rises sometime here about now.
But, so James, it's 7:47. 7:47.
It ought to be about over the horizon now, Span. We need to
where we are, and I know that because within the last since 7:47, The count is now over 300 photographs, 300 that have come in already, which means
That's all I have to
I'm
do is
on
go to
track
Twitter
toward
now. I can see the super blue moon
Yeah.
all I want right here.
probably getting over 5,000 photos tonight. And,
And I'll tell you
some are
that
amazing.
James Spann put out a great Twitter this afternoon in regard to that, for himself showing himself in a great GIF image about working tonight.
Yeah. Listen, I am thankful for every single photograph I get. But, some people say it's an amazing picture of this supermoon, and they get their phone out and it's a little white dot that's out of focus, and I'm sure it's amazing to you when you look at it, but that's not an amazing photograph. But there are some that really are good at taking photographs of a situation like tonight. And
that is too
try and
funny.
kinda
I just am now seeing that GIF you're talking about, Troy. That is hilarious.
He was I got that one retweeted real quick. So
yeah, I mean, I wish you could see what it looks like over here. It's just bam, 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 but they're coming in that fast. And the world record was the night we had the aurora display a couple of months ago, which was I will never be able to see all those. These I will see tonight, but it's pretty amazing. But Alan, I got many questions. So in your retirement, do you still dabble in social media much? How much time do you spend on those platforms while we're talking about it?
Very little. And that's the fun part is I'll go 2 or 3 days without posting anything. And then if I see something really cool, like today, it may have been the Melbourne office of the Weather Service posted a recap of 2004 and all the hurricanes that moved through Florida. So I shared that. I'm not doing Facebook Lives. What was the last thing I posted that did well? I forgot what it was. Oh, the anniversary of Camille, a piece that I put together and I shared that. So yeah, I'm doing very little. I am not forecasting. I don't want people to look to me for forecast information because as you know, it's a full-time commitment and I'm not committed full-time to forecasting weather for anyone other than me.
All right, so let's do a case study. So a hypothetical situation. So October 1st, you have a major hurricane that's 100 miles south of Mobile Bay. People have been looking to you for years and years and years. You are the Nash Roberts of this generation. So the question is, will you come out of this and do weather updates for a big hurricane, or will you just still stay off and let other people do it?
Number two, let's see. We had a thunderstorm last week that knocked out power to my house. I don't have a generator. So there's reason number one why I'm not trying to do what we used to do at TV stations. Number two is I may be the first one evacuating. Number three, I may be the first one going to the beach with my cameras and saying, hey, Cantori, see you later, and taking pictures. So no, I have no intention on opening that door because you can't close it. And the other half of it is the next generation can't grow and be the best they can be if I loom over their careers. So I don't want to do that.
So describe the state of the industry now that you've had a chance to step back and you're not in the middle of it and you can look at it. What's the state of broadcast meteorology and where does it need to go?
It's still a strong profession. It is not what it was for all of us growing up, where you turn on the news at 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, whatever. That does happen, but of course, people, they're on those apps. They're getting their information from the app most of the time. But we are on the gas pumps. We're in the elevator. We are on the front of the refrigerator. We are on the billboard. We are in the stadium during the game. So TV meteorology is still strong. It is still, I know there's a fear of AI replacing humans in some things, but it's not going to replace the human eye contact and breathing and voice and communicative ability that you need when there is a disaster or a threat in your community. It can't replace someone saying, oh yeah, I was over at that store across the street from this school, and if you're over here, AI is not going to do that. So young people, I tell them all the time, it's a great profession still, but know what you're getting into, which is job contracts, 2% raises if you're lucky, when the rate of inflation is averaging 4%. So you're going to lose money throughout your career if you don't advance and move up, or start doing things on the side like consulting, writing books, doing independent videos. The TV weather broadcasting within TV is a different story, because TV is overly driven by sponsorship. And yeah, unfortunately, the money drives a lot of decisions which are not just pure straight journalism. It's a question of profit versus, well, yeah, it's a profit versus everything else.
Yeah, and again, times are changing, and I'm positive. I think something good will come about as a result of the changes. But I think we're near the end of these traditional Ron Burgundy, 6 o'clock news. Good evening. So, in terms of weather forecasting, you have the numerical weather prediction czar on the show here. What do you need? What do we need to be better, Alan, at getting forecasts right, especially high impact forecasts, short term? What do we need? Where do we need to go from here when it comes to the science and forecasting?
The science is actually the social science. We need people to understand that there's a limit, that no one can tell you what will happen exactly at your house. That's the bottom line. People have to understand that concept. And from there, they have to understand probability, where there is no yes, no.
Probabilistic forecasting. Yes.
It's what are the odds that this will happen, not will it happen, yes or no. To me, what's amazing, it took me years to accept the fact that I cannot out forecast the HER and other models for that point. But whether it's on your smartphone with the proprietary hourly forecast or the HER and the other high resolution models, those things are incredible. If you understand, they're not forecasting for your house. If you look, yes, they're forecasting for a couple of counties or a county, but it's not going to consistently pinpoint your house. But other than that, dense data networks, which is money. It'd be interesting to see what phased array radar. We're about to make a big update, hopefully, in the National Weather Service radar network to see what that will do. The various articles I've seen on AI forecasting holds a lot of promise, even though no one knows how it's doing it, apparently. But it still comes back to people understanding that what they're hearing, here's what it means. What's a watch versus a warning? If they don't know that, still going to be a lot of problems.
But I think what the message I'm hearing, and I firmly agree, is that there's always going to be a place for humans in the science. I don't want any of these kids to get discouraged that want to do this for a living. It might be a little different, but in terms of working for the Weather Service or working in the private sector, the jobs will always be there.
Yeah. Yeah. We humans are the ones who interpret the data. We create the models that create the data, or we create the AI that creates the AI model. But even more importantly, we are the teachers. We're teaching the next generation. We're teaching the public. That goes back to a question Bill had about memorable storms. With Ivan, to this day, people will come up to me and tell me, I remember you told me this in the middle of the storm, and I went outside and looked, and that's exactly what happened. And it's little things you do that you forget that you did, but they taught someone something that stayed with them for the rest of their lives. And that's what human beings do. So yeah, we humans, we will be here. We will be there, as I'm doing now with forensic meteorology, in the courtroom, if needed, telling people here's what and how and why, to make it simple for the average person to understand.
And I do want to go back to Ivan real quick, and we have to take a break here in a second. But that was obviously a high impact event in my market as well. And this, for those that don't know, this was 20 years ago. This was 2004. And um, if you, looking back on that, Alan, if you could go back and change anything in the way you handled it, would you change anything, do you think? Because I like to learn from case studies and what went right, what went wrong, and especially for those on the coast in the middle of this thing where we dealt with it, obviously, but not to the extreme case that you did. But goodness,
Yeah.
I saw people with blue tarps on their roofs far inland for months after this thing. And the impact was severe. It was widespread, and it affected so many people. Or would you do anything differently? I mean, it seemed to me it was pretty well forecast, and I think people were ready. Don't you think?
I think so. Ivan was the point where when I was at WKRG, we had a WSI weather computer, and the station had just invested in a Barron's Viper and fast track computer. So we had both computer systems. And I remember looking at the Barron's system with the wave modeling, and it showed waves in the Gulf of 50 feet, 50.
Ooh.
I didn't believe it because I didn't know that was possible. So that, I mean, that would be like one little thing I would change. Now that I know it's possible, that would have helped me really understand that, yes, this is a monster storm, even though it was pretty clear it was a pretty powerful storm. But in general, there was nothing, fortunately, and I could say this for most of my career, there's really no major thing I would change about what I've done, how I've handled the storm. The things I would change are really little things. For example, during Ivan, one of my coworkers was on air broadcasting. I had taken a break, but my microphone was still on. And I said some things that I shouldn't have said out loud. Fortunately, they were rated G. And I don't think
entry level cuss words. Entry level, yeah, yes.
But yeah, little things like that. And then when I think back over my career, the interactions with coworkers, which is like any other interaction. Sometimes someone will say something they shouldn't have said, or you'll say something you shouldn't have said, and then you'll have a little friction. But that's why you have to read my book.
There you go. And we'll promote those here before we wrap this thing up. But one more question, Sally. That's an interesting case study.
Okay.
And
yeah,
this goes into all this. I think the way you handled it was just really, really good. But for some reason, people didn't hear everything you had to say. Why? It was just an odd case study where people on the street, I didn't know it was going to be this bad. They didn't tell us it was going to be that bad. Well, yes, you did.
Yeah,
you did.
Oh boy. Okay. Now that you put it that way, there are some things I would change. I think myself, and I think the weather enterprise, the weather service, we put so much emphasis on the initial forecast, which was a beeline track to southeastern Louisiana. And that was heading up toward a weekend. Everybody burned in their brain, myself included, that was the most likely track. And then, of course, getting into the weekend, the steering winds slowed, it stalled, and then meandered. So that my biggest lesson there is to not, you have to change when the data changes, for both meteorologists and for the public. And part of the problem was by the time it was obvious it was changing, people had tuned out because they didn't think it was a possibility. But we were still in the forecast cone, which is what the forecast cone means, that it's a possibility. So yeah, that one was, I could have done better. In real time, I don't know that I could have done better, but looking back, I could have done better.
Yeah, that's a fascinating case study. So, for those that want to buy your books, Alan, plug away. This is your plug segment. Go.
Okay. Well, thank you very much. So I've got 3 books. One is my career in TV meteorology. It does have cuss words in it, although I put a lot of strange characters in there to kind of hide them. And it has the true the verbatims of people that called me bad stuff after I interrupted CSI Miami, the first segment. I also have sort of a what it's like. I don't want to use the other book's name. It's a book for people who want to understand weather from A to Z. And while I'm talking about it, I'll put the QR code up there. This will take you to, if I can get it to focus, my website where all my books are. And then the third book, which I'll show in a second, is a weather photography book. So I've been taking weather photos since 5th grade. And I realized when I was working in Chicago, unable to advance in my career, and working for a news director who told me you can stay or you can leave, that I could do things on the side. And one of the things I did on the side was start building a catalog of weather photography and weather videography. So this is the book. It's called the, whatever it says. I can't read it backward.
Weather things and photos.
Excellent. There you go. And every single picture in here, I've flown with the Hurricane Hunters a couple of times. But, oh, in fact, the coolest thing, it's not in this book. But my last flight with the Hurricane Hunters into Hurricane Nate in the Gulf of Mexico, I think it was 2012. The 2 flight meteorologists were both students of mine at the University of South Alabama. So that was the coolest thing, to be in the eye of a hurricane with my former students. But it's a coffee table book, and it's a great book for people interested in weather. They're all my photos. And then, as I mentioned, for the other show and tell, one of my recent lightning shots that I got here in Mobile. So, yeah, this is my retirement, just having fun and trying to be creative.
See, Alan understands f-stop and focal length and aperture and all these, camera terms. I just click a button on a phone. That's all I can do. For the people that do that, it's hard. I mean, it's an art, and it's not everybody is gifted in photography, but Alan's work is just tremendous. So we got to hurry here and get him out there to take some pictures of this moon so we can send it to me. I've already got about 500 white out of focus dot pictures.
And you know, the worst thing with these moon pictures is you could send one from last month, the month before, and they all look the same.
They do. That's why I tell people, try and get something in the frame so you can see maybe a few treetops or something, for reference, the little white dot thing. But anyway, I am thankful for everybody that sends me pictures. I really am. But they're still rolling in here. But Alan, if you can stay with us for a few more minutes, we got to take a quick break and hear from Tony Rice. In fact, he's our astronomy expert. We're going to hear from Jen, and This Week in Tornado History. We'll come back with an email segment, Picks of the Week. We'll do a weather roundup. I want to talk about the rest of the hurricane season. A lot to talk about as WeatherBrains rolls along.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your astronomy outlook.
The first of 4 supermoons rises tonight at sunset. Super because it's reaching full phase near the closest point in the moon's orbit around the Earth, a point called perigee. Now, you may have seen it called a super blue moon or even a super blue sturgeon moon. As your marine life aside for a moment, why is it being called blue? Isn't a blue moon the second of 2 full moons in a calendar month? Well, yes, that's the most common definition today. It hasn't always been that way. The term blue moon originated back in the 1930s, and then it meant the 3rd full moon in a season with 4 full moons. According to an article in the July 27, 2006 Sky and Telescope magazine, which goes into excruciating detail on research that the authors did on the etymology of the term blue moon, the definition we use today is likely a mistake, a misreading of the original definition that appeared in a Sky and Telescope article in the mid-1940s. So why did the definition that we're more familiar with, why did it stick? One of the reasons came in the 1980s. Today's definition was the answer to a Trivial Pursuit question. So why is that classic definition focused on the 3rd of 4 moons? Isn't the 4th one in a season the oddity? I don't know, and I haven't been able to find a folklorist who knows either. That's important to keep in mind here. This isn't science with hard definitions that change only when disproven. This is folklore, which changes seemingly with the wind. Elsewhere in the sky, WeatherBrains listeners along the East Coast from Florida to the Mid-Atlantic, look to the east tomorrow morning after 5:36 a.m. That's launch time for SpaceX's launch of another batch of Starlink satellites, this time from pad Slick 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Launch time is scheduled for about 4 minutes after the beginning of astronomical twilight, which could make for a spectacular sight. The rising sun can catch the rocket exhaust as it ascends, while it's still dark enough here on the ground to be able to see it. This can create what looks like a jellyfish in the sky as that plume expands in the thinning atmosphere. That's your astronomy outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
This week in tornado history, an unexpected tornado outbreak occurred on August 24th, 2016. 22 tornadoes were recorded in portions of Ohio and Indiana. 2 tornadoes occurred in Ontario, Canada. This event is in the top 10 for the largest number of tornadoes in a single August day across the U.S. since records began in 1950. One of the strongest tornadoes of the day hit at 3:20 p.m. Eastern Time in Howard County, Indiana. It hit the Kokomo area. The tornado tracked over 8.5 miles with maximum winds estimated at 152 miles per hour. The Howard Haven Residential Center at 3600 West Boulevard received extensive damage. The director of the center, Jennifer Brower, protected one of the residents from flying glass by shielding her with her own body. They both received just minor injuries. In the Markland Mall area, a Starbucks was flattened. Shift supervisor Angel Ramos was hailed a hero for calmly asking the patrons to take shelter in the bathrooms. Everyone survived. Per the National Weather Service, a total of 1,000 homes sustained some degree of damage. As the residents of Kokomo were analyzing the damage around them, little did they know that 4 more tornadoes were to occur across parts of Howard County several hours after this devastating blow. It was a tremendously unnerving time for the community. These additional tornadoes steered clear of Kokomo with less damage. The August 24th, 2016 tornado brought back memories to a twister that hit practically this same area only 3 years before. On November 17th, 2013, an EF2 damaged well-built homes and other buildings on the south side of Kokomo. Get hooked on tornado history with us by going to our website, tornadotalk.com.
Hey, just maybe, we have an email to read tonight.
We've got our email of the week, and this comes from just Jay. I don't know who Jay is. We still have a little email problem. We don't know.
We can't email them or anything like that.
Yeah, so thank you, Jay. Why is Radar Scope not available in CarPlay or its Android equivalent? It sure would seem handy. I know one of you smart people knows the answer.
I have wondered the exact same thing.
That's actually a
That
really
was
good
me.
question.
That was my email.
Oh, very good, James A. You
You
know,
almost know.
there are 2 apps that I know of that do work on CarPlay, but they're nowhere near the quality of, of our favorite apps. Now, I have seen something interesting lately, and I don't know if it's worth the trouble, but there's something that turns your CarPlay unit into an Android device. And then you could run whatever you can run on an Android device. But, obviously that leads to all sorts of potential problems if you're watching YouTube videos driving down the road or something. But, you could, I guess, do that and, have your radar on these nice displays that we have in our cars now. But it really would be a great idea to be able to see yourself in relation to the storms, like you do. See your location on your GPS. It really would be a good idea. So that's a great question. We need somebody at DTN, I guess, who owns Radar Scope now. So we need to reach out to them and see if we can get an answer
I
for
wonder
that.
if it's a liability issue. You get into a major crash and you kill somebody because you're screwing around looking at radar on your dash, and that's a major lawsuit.
I'm sure that's
here,
why
and,
it's not happening.
Yeah,
but we do look at GPS.
That's absolutely
on our
never happened
display.
before with storm chasers or anyone.
No,
absolutely,
no,
it's never happened. So
they just mount a 16-inch laptop on a stand right in the front on the console.
Yeah.
And I cannot tell a lie. I've got an iPad Mini in my vehicle, and having said that, I've got a for those that don't know, I drive an old 4Runner with 388,000 miles.
Yeah.
So I don't have all this fancy stuff that you guys have. Y'all are driving the the Lamborghinis and the Jags and all this stuff, but so I don't have this fancy display. So I've got a little iPad Mini in there, so I can see anything I want to. So. But yeah, I do. I understand the question, and it is a good question. So we'll try and find out.
That is a good question. Thank you so much, James Ayla, for being our email of the week.
Thank you,
And,
James.
yes, we appreciate that for making it so clear that it was you. But if you would like to send us an email at weatherbrains.com. I do ask that you put your full name if you would like to have full credit, and also put your email because we can't email you back at the moment. But anyway, that's our email of the week.
It's federal spam laws, and the solution is worse than the problem, guys. I'm telling y'all. That's why I'm dreading implementing it.
I don't think anybody sees any of the emails. I'll send emails to the group. I don't think anybody's seen my emails in 2 months. So we got to figure this out. And I don't think I get any emails from listeners anymore. So I think we're basically dead in the water. Jen, do you get them?
Yeah, I
You must.
I get them. I got the one today.
Yeah, I got this one.
I don't get any. I mean,
you didn't get
I've
the one
gone
about
radio
the
silent.
CarPlay, James?
I know Bill
No.
cut me off.
No.
And
yeah, I cut you off, Troy.
And cut off. But I got to think that we could get an email distribute. I'm not.
Yeah, we have a solution,
out
but
there,
it is worse than the problem. And
come on. There's got to be a way.
It just can't be that. It can't be that hard.
Well,
I mean,
it's not hard. Y'all are just not going to like it. So I'm.
Can y'all get my work emails to not go through? That'd be awesome. Don't get any of those.
Yeah. So anyway, we still use it, and we are hopefully going to have a solution here soon. But Jen, give it one more time for those that don't know our email address.
It's email at weatherbrains.com.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah.
All right, so let's talk about the I want to focus on Neil and Alan here. Neil, your thoughts on the rest of the hurricane season?
Yeah.
I think it's going to ramp up. I mean, there's a ton of heat in the water. The shear's been kind of favorable. I know a lot of the models were pretty aggressive about trying to take us right into a La Nina, and the observations were having none of it. So it's been kind of neutral, but I think, at some point the models are going to get it right. It's going to go negative. And, I don't see a reason why we're not going to have a ramp up towards the end. I don't know that we're going to have like some catastrophic season that was originally predicted, but I do think I'm still thinking it's going to be above average. I mean, a lot of people are writing it off, but we're not even at the peak yet.
We're not even peak. That didn't start the first week, Alan, of really getting the first week of September until that around October 1 or something like that. And then folks, don't count it out yet, please.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Even without looking at the data, that's the main way I look at it is on one hand, it's great that we start so much messaging at the start of hurricane season, but it leaves such a big gap before the season truly starts.
True.
And then people are like, well, they said, but yeah, stuff spins up out of nowhere.
Yep.
All right. So let's quickly, we've got this continental air, obviously, for the northern and eastern states where it's so nice, but summer's got a long way to go. But it is exciting that meteorological fall is a couple of weeks away. So at some point, and footballs will be flying soon, so it will get here. But let's do picks of the week. This is where we go around the horn, and everybody's going to share something cool and weather related. This can be a website, data source, book, anything, you name it. So, Alan, we'll give you a few minutes to think about it. Let's go over to Rick Smith, who always has an amazing pick. Rick, give us something good.
Yeah, my pick of the week is one I probably share every year. There's a group that keeps a total of all the lightning fatalities, a running account of all the lightning fatalities and the circumstances. And there's been some really sad situations this year with lightning fatalities already. So my pick of the week is the 2024 lightning fatality tracker. It's not the happiest topic, but so important. And it's so sad every year to see that almost every single lightning fatality that happens is someone doing something that you're most precisely not supposed to be doing at all. So that's my pick.
All right, good deal. We'll put the links up on weatherbrains.com. James Adelot, give us a good pick of the week.
Mine is that NSF report on diversity in STEM fields with 2021 data. It seems really fitting to share tonight.
Indeed, excellent. All right, Jen, give us a good one.
Sadly, it's a really tragic story out of Italy from this morning, but they're still trying to do search and rescue of a super yacht that sank this morning. And apparently it struck a tornado slash water spout. And it's off the coast of Sicily. And it was a super yacht entrepreneur, Mike Lynch, and his daughter are still missing. And then there has been at least one fatality. There was a woman who survived, though, and they tells how she was holding her 1-year-old. But so the thing sank, and so they're still out right now, still doing search and rescue. So the link is to the Sky News blog, and they're doing updates on what's happening.
Okay, cool. Interesting, fascinating story. My pick, quickly, it's a piece of video that was sent to me on Saturday. We have summer storms every day here in scattered spots, and we had one up in the Tennessee Valley in a community called Hillsboro, which is in Lawrence County near Decatur, and Decatur's in Morgan County. But this was basically a little event they had Saturday morning where they had some tents and vendors and big bouncy house and a slide. And this storm blew up. I mean, it developed within literally 5 minutes, and the winds were probably gusting to hurricane force, and it sent that slide flying. If you've not seen that, just a reminder that you don't have to have a tornado to have problems here with storms. And we've had some storms this weekend that really packed a punch. But it's a pretty cool video if you've not seen that. So again, we'll put a link up on the website weatherbrains.com. Troy, give us a good one.
I don't know that I really have one, but I'm going to take a second here and talk about Alan and what he has done for our profession through the years. It's always been an honor. I got to see Alan this summer at the broadcasters meeting at Myrtle Beach, and my friend, it's always been an honor, and we're so happy you've been with us tonight. And
Thank you.
so my pick of the week are his books. So I'm gonna go for mentioning those. But good to see you, Alan.
I appreciate.
We're gonna squeeze out all your promotion, Alan. You're gonna have to work hard.
Yeah,
exactly. All right, Dr. Neil Jacobs, give us a good pick.
Well, some more sad news. Eugenia Calney passed away a few days ago. And for folks in the NWP and data assimilation community, she was an icon and a hero. Has always been a mentor to me in data assimilation. I learned from her book. I use her book. I make sure all my students buy it and read it. I still have the original signed copy that I got from her. So my pick of the week is her book on atmospheric modeling, data assimilation, and predictability.
Interesting. And again, we'll put a link to that book up on weatherbrains.com. Kim, give us a good pick.
Well, man, after all of that sadness, I'm going to have a very orthogonal kind of pick. Alan, you had mentioned earlier about after the Civil War period, Black Americans having some stance sometimes in the community because of this mysticism that surrounded them and their possible, ability to foresee the weather. And it reminded me of what I've heard about Native people, and that they, beyond even just knowing about the weather, they also, in their traditional beliefs, they often felt that they could control it. And I found a history thesis that explores some of this and talks about the what's called hoodoo, the African American religious tradition that arose as a sort of mix of the enforced Christianity and what the native religious practices and cultural practices from Central Africa. And in those, it was very frequently the case that beyond even just knowing about the weather and knowing about the environment, like you'd said, like they learned a lot of that, I guess, from Native Americans. They also had attributes of conjuring. That was a big part, hoodoo conjuring. So there was this idea also attached to them that they could affect outcomes and control the environment. So it's an interesting thesis, and I really appreciate you mentioning that. It really piqued my curiosity. So that pick will be up on our website.
Nice.
All right, Alan, we have stalled long enough because now it's your turn to give us something really cool.
So I can't find it, but someone who presented at one of the conferences has a website about bounce houses and wind. And I can't
Probably John
remember.
Knox.
Is it John?
It may have been.
But it's like bounce house something wind dot something. But search for that if you can find it.
Okay. All right. We
but
will
have the
dig
Google
for that.
Yeah.
Yes.
But other than that, appropriately, I will go with pick of the week, the National Hurricane Center. If you want to know, the answer is right there.
Well, you mean my TikTok dancer guy's not a good source? I watched.
Only
Oh
if he's
boy,
cussing.
the TikTok dancer that's cussing and forecasting weather. It's just you can't make some of this stuff up. But yeah, the National Hurricane Center, they are the best of the best. All right, Bill Murray, go.
Yeah, next week, James, will have Vanessa Alonso on the show. She's an amazing meteorologist. Looking forward to talking to her. And she said that you told her at a conference you saw her at recently, I think Troy may have been involved in this too, that we were going to be nice to her. Have we ever not been? Oh, there's a lease. Sorry. Yeah. Yeah, there is precedent. Sorry. Okay,
yes,
that was crazy. But anyway, she's the last guest that will ever be on WeatherBrains because I've run out of guests. So I've got to get on my high horse and get to work on the next generation of weather guests because next week's the last one. So I better get to work.
Wow.
Oh, and
All
my
right,
pick of the week is
so,
Alan's presentation.
We've had Bill buried so much on this email stuff that I know he hates me. So I wonder, Bill, if
I keep your
one thing
email
at a
taped
time.
on the front of my monitor here, Troy. I will get to it. I'm just dreading it. But anyway, from Juneteenth to the Sky, a timeline of achievement and milestones for African Americans in meteorology and atmospheric science is my pick. It is some of the best 25 minutes, 26 minutes you'll spend ever on YouTube. And I went back and watched the old 30 for 30 on Dude Perfect. Do y'all remember Dude Perfect back in the late 2000s? They were the first ones that were doing the crazy trick shots and things.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
You know, they were the ones who got lots of notoriety. And you know, it was a great ESPN 30 for 30, which I love. But I thought, you know, they said on that show, they said at that point in its career, YouTube was a garbage dump. And I think it's come some ways from being a garbage dump. There's still some garbage on it, but you know, stuff like this really makes it really worthwhile.
Hey, Jen, you found the bounce house deal.
Yeah,
I did. Weathertobounce.com, and they have a BAM's journal article and everything. So it's pretty cool.
My goodness.
Yeah, I mean, they were actually in BAM's with this, and I'm trying to see who.
Yeah,
this is a fancy looking site here. I mean, weather-related bounce house.
First author.
Wow, Dr. Knox, University of Georgia. There you go.
He already has that Alabama event incident up on here. A link to everything. It's pretty cool.
Wow, this is outstanding. Goodness gracious, weathertobounce.com. Goodness,
leave it to John to come up with that great domain too.
John Knox, great job. All right, well, we got to wrap this thing up here. If you're new, we typically do WeatherBrains on Monday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern, 7 o'clock Central, and you can watch it live, the video version on YouTube, the WeatherBrains YouTube channel, youtube.com/WeatherBrains. But we know that most of you listen to the audio podcast, which comes out typically during the pre-dawn hours on Tuesday morning. Whatever. Thank you. And listen, if you don't want to get in touch with us, it's complex, but by golly, maybe it'll work. Jen is getting the emails, and that's all that matters. So send the emails to email@weatherbrains.com. And maybe Jen can forward them to the rest of us. Because I send stuff to email at WeatherBrains, and I don't even see it. But anyway, somebody will see it here. But we got to go. On behalf of the entire WeatherBrains crew, I'm James Spann. Thanks for listening. Have a great week, and God bless.
Y'all have a good week.
Bye.
Thank you, Alan.
Alan, thank you. Great show. Great show.
Great to see you.
You're a stinking rock star.
Yeah.
Yes, you are.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye.